Boy, oh boy, what a year this has been. There have been lots of interesting things going on here in the lighting and, well, mostly fan industry is what we're here to talk about today. And as you know, at the end of every year, I like to do a little end of year discussion, which is usually rather lengthy, about basically all the major brands and basically what they got up to, how I think they did, basically just my takes on everything that's been going on. Now, I did actually already have this recorded, as I'm sure a lot of you knew, but then I lost the video, so I'm redoing this again. So hopefully it'll be match up to my expectations of the previous time. Otherwise, I unfortunately don't have time to re-record. So if this isn't to my usual standards, I do apologize. Usually I record these with enough time to where I can, do a few takes, take a few hours just to do takes until I get one I like. But unfortunately, I don't have that option anymore. So let's hop right on into this. So first of all, for this year, we are going to talk about Big Ass Fans. Now, Big Ass Fans actually did quite a bit this year. They introduced a new fan called the Speakeasy, and then another one. It was another, I'm honestly spacing on the model name, but it was another large scale fan, quite like we see from Big Ass Fans a lot. Not to mention, they also introduced some other finishes. The Haiku Coastal either came out or at least really got popularized and sort of, how do I say this, updated and upgraded a lot this year. So there were lots of things going on for Big Ass Fans, and it's quite exciting. They've been known for their commercial fans for ages, and then around 10, 15 years ago, they introduced the Haiku, and then that really kicked off the whole residential side of things, and they've continued to expand, and I'm noticing far more in these past couple of years than I have ever before. So definitely very exciting and definitely a good brand to keep an eye out on. Prices are definitely higher than other brands. However, they definitely do make some decent stuff. And if you can afford it, that price point is definitely worth it. You get some really good fans out of that. So, up next, the next brand is going to be Canarm. Now, Canarm this year, as per usual, didn't do a whole lot. Really, Canarm never interests me per se. They just always put out a steady flow of new products, some of which I really like, others I don't, some of which I'm indifferent on. This year was no different. I can't really think of any particular models to be exact that they really did that I liked this year. However, as per usual, they had a pretty decent selection. This selection has definitely been better than some of the previous years. I was really happy with what they did this year. Just, it's more like as a collective rather than just like one model on its own that impressed me here. Otherwise, there's not really a whole lot else to say. As per usual, they're just doing their thing and doing pretty good. Now, up next, we'll talk about Karo. Now, Karo this year has really expanded. From when I first started, working with them and talking to them about 3 or 4 years ago, I've noticed such a growth from about 20 different fan designs to a couple hundred. I've been very, very impressed with that. Their website has also grown and expanded. Their products lineup has also expanded beyond just residential ceiling fans. They now have HVLS style fans and a lot of commercial grade fans. Alongside that, they still have their lighting line, which they're continuing to expand, as well as also what seems like wall paneling and some other things. Now, Karo is a smart home manufacturer. They don't just make fans, and it seems like they're finally starting to add more of that onto their website, which is definitely nice. They should showcase everything they do because the fans are terrific. I'm sure everything else is as well. Otherwise, just another standard year for Karo, adding on tons of exciting stuff. Every year it's exciting, and you can never be too sure when they're going to add something new to the line, so I always check their website quite often. Now, next up, we'll talk about Craftmade, and boy, oh boy, Craftmade had a wild year this year. Over the last few years, I've noticed Craftmade continue and continue and continue to grow and expand and impress me. Now, I have always liked Craftmade. Some people haven't. Really, Craftmade is polarizing. Either people love it or they hate it. I, for one, love it, and these last few years have really showed me that. They've been continuing to expand the catalog, and a couple of years ago, they just put all products together in one catalog. Then this year, that catalog got extremely, extremely thick. One of the thickest catalogs I've ever had, full of tons of different stuff, full of tons of different designs. And what's really exciting is that this year they actually introduced their first June supplement. They did not print it. However, it's nice to see that they've done one of those finally. And one thing here that I really should mention that I like about the brand is that they don't just have 2 drops a year. They have 4. They've got one in the winter, one in the spring, one in the summer, and one in the fall. I've never seen any brand do it quite like KraftMaid, besides brands like Hunter and Caro, who are so, heavily online on their own websites that it's a little bit different. But no, KraftMaid has been doing things different, and I really appreciate it. Their designs are unique and exciting, and there's some things that I never would have expected to see, especially from KraftMaid. Not to mention that they are moving further into the Fandelier category, and the Fandelier category that I really like, which is the one that's got just a smaller scale ceiling fan inside of it rather than just a portable fan motor. Those ones never seem to do as good as the smaller scale ceiling fans. And I've heard some other people say they're definitely encroaching in on Maxim and Fanimation with some of their Fandeliers. So that is very, very exciting to see another brand sort of get added onto that little portfolio of really nice Fandeliers. Not to mention that these prices are definitely better than some of the other ones available too. Overall, KraftMaid really did impress me this year, and I am so excited to see what they do next year. I do hope that the catalog gets a little bit thinner, though. As much as I love a thick catalog, the truth is the paper was just so thick, and that is what really made the catalog thick. It doesn't really necessarily have a whole lot more pages than the previous one. But, that's just my own personal take and my own desperate need for more space on my catalog shelf, as it is getting quite full. Now, if you'll excuse me, allergy season, well, not really allergy season anymore, but winter weather sniffles and things are definitely going around right now once again. Well, I would have liked to have this done earlier, but you get what you get when my phone decides to be stupid. Anyways, up next, we have Dan's Fan City. Now, they didn't do a whole lot this year. They actually introduced this year's catalog in December of last year, and therefore I'm not really including it because I believe I did talk about it last year. This year, they did introduce a couple smart and Wi-Fi versions of some of last year's introductions. And I'm still waiting to see some DC pull chain fans. Me and some other collectors have heard from them that that's what they were going to do. I haven't seen it yet. Maybe they gave us the runaround. I'm not too sure, but I would definitely like to see that from them. They said that they were going to be expanding a couple of the early lines like the Tiara and the Dixie Bella and making them also DC pull chains. So I guess we'll see if that happens. Dan's Fan City, some years they do stuff, other years they don't. So it's a little hit and miss with what I say in these videos here. Now, up next, we're going to talk about Design House for a split second. They didn't do anything. Moving on. Anyways, next up we have Eglo, and Eglo had a great year this year. I was very impressed. So over the last 5 or so years, they've had a collection of 5 ceiling fans. I should say 5 ceiling fan designs here on the US market. Overseas, they always had a far more extensive line. And then I want to say it was last year, the year before, they discontinued a few of them to where there are only 2 left. This year, they discontinued all of them. But they introduced a whole new line that was much closer to what I see in a lot of the different foreign lineups, like in Australia and the UK. And I was very, very impressed with what I could see. A lot of them are modern and sleek, and they look terrific. And there's finish options available, different size options available, which is really nice. And they definitely bring a little bit of a touch in that we don't see here in the US too often. Since Eglo is a foreign-based company, they definitely bring something different to the table, which is always exciting. The American brands usually stick to their own thing and stick to a little bit more American ways and designs. However, Eglo and any other foreign manufacturer like Beacon and some of the others, they tend to do things differently. Speaking of Beacon, I probably should mention Beacon for a little bit here since they are actually part of the US. This year they introduced a new catalog and a few new designs. Nothing a whole lot. This is like their 3rd or 4th year in the US, so they're definitely still finding their way here, but they've been in Australia for ages. Definitely not the greatest products, but definitely not horrible. Anyways, now that we're moving on from that sidetrack, we are going to talk about Emerson / Kathy Ireland Home. Now, you're thinking, dude, the brand's dead. What the heck? Well, of course, I'm sure some of you are not thinking that because you know that's not the case. I believe Home Depot purchased the rights to the Kathy Ireland Home name and some of the models, and now on Home Depot's website, you can buy some of the old Emerson fans at a cheaper price point, and yet they're still the same product, which means just a better value for the customer, which is always exciting. Of course, some of the classic models like the Premium and the Pembroke and some of those haven't come back. I have a feeling due to the Blade Select and the whole K55 type Eco motor that they couldn't get the rights to that. However, the rest of them, I'm sure will be coming down the line. Right now, there's probably about 10 or 15 different models. I wouldn't be surprised if there ends up being more down the line, but that is just what we have right now. Definitely exciting, though, to see that some of these products are living on despite the brand going under. Very, very exciting. Now, up next, Fanimation. And boy, what a year for Fanimation. Now, Fanimation, I always love their products. I love the quality, but I'd say over the last 6 or 7 years, I've always liked the intros, but they've never really stuck out to me like other brands have. It's just never been all that interesting that just makes me say, oh my God, that's flippin' awesome. However, this year they did. They introduced numerous terrific designs, and they also added on some plug and play for the wiring for the receivers, which is a real good thing because installing those receivers otherwise with all those wires can definitely get a little bit complicated and definitely hard to fit inside the electrical box, especially for people who decide not to trim the leads to keep the fans original. Now, also, I really just have to mention that their quality has been just nonstop amazing, really ever since this brand started. They are easily probably my favorite brand out there. This year, my local stores have been starting to sell way more Fanimation than they have even in the past, which is always exciting. I'm so happy to see this brand continuing to thrive. And yeah, this year was definitely a terrific one. One interesting note to mention with Fanimation is that they introduced a model at the start of the year called the Breeze. Now, this fan here had an acrylic flywheel, quite like the Modern Forms Aura. I believe Modern Forms probably issued a cease and desist or something and basically said, if you don't get rid of this fan, we're taking you to court because the design was far too similar to Modern Forms. Now, it was kind of surprising that Fanimation would have been the brand to do that. In the past, Fanimation has always come up with their own designs and been very, very creative. I was definitely kind of disappointed that it had to have been Fanimation to do that, but it is still just something I thought I would mention here because I'm sure some of you would find that interesting. And of course, it disappeared from the printed catalog. It wasn't even in there at all. So, up next, we're going to talk about Home Enhancements. This is a smaller brand a lot of you guys aren't too familiar with. This year, they continued to add just a couple new products into the lineup. Nothing too special. This is a brand based out of Texas. They have mostly like builder stuff and more lower end stuff. They were formerly known as Sunway. But yeah, I just figured I'd pop on and mention them for a second here, even though they really didn't do too much all that interesting this year. But there's still more years to come, and they're still, I think, finding their way with the whole new brand name and everything. And they're trying to bring things up to the times a little bit more, which is definitely exciting to see. Now, next up, Hunter and Casablanca. Usually I'd have all bad things to say. There's only 2 times I haven't. Well, actually 3. First off in 2016 for the Casablanca line. Next up would have been 2021 for the new original. And this year. Why this year? Well, the Casablanca line has been basically falling out of favor and disappearing into the background for probably 5 or 6 years now. However, this year, they introduced 2 new models to the Casablanca lineup. Now, while I do not believe that these fans are the greatest things out there, it was definitely nice to see some new Casablanca products come out, and they definitely look a lot nicer than some of the other Hunter products that have been getting introduced. What I would really like to see, though, is how nice these feel compared to standard Hunters, or whether they are basically the same quality. So one of my biggest issues with Hunters over the recent years, everything just feels like the same quality, whether you're buying Casablanca or Hunter, and Casablanca is always more expensive, so it doesn't always really make sense, to go out and buy a Casablanca. As far as the Hunter side of things went, and there were of course new designs, nothing really all that interesting, but still, new stuff is new stuff, and Hunter's another one of those brands that just releases stuff whenever they feel like it, so they definitely have dedicated summer and winter drops, but then they just introduce other stuff whenever. This year, though, Hunter's side, pretty boring, just the same old, same old. Definitely was exciting to see new Casablanca. I already did a discussion on this, I'm not going to go too much further into it, but all I want to say is that I hope that as they continue, that they continue to expand the Casablanca line, because this line needs some attention. It is an infamous name, and it's definitely sort of falling and sort of sliding under the radar now. Anyways, up next, we are going to talk about Kendall. Now, Kendall is a primarily Canadian-based manufacturer, quite like Can-Arm. However, Unlike Canarm, Kendall has been struggling for a little bit here. Over the last 4 years, they've basically only introduced paper-thin little market previews. They're not even real supplements. It says Dallas Market Preview right on it, which definitely doesn't look as good, to a customer when you're showing them a catalog. Fortunately, most places have moved to digital now, so that's not the biggest of deals. However, I just noticed a real just lack, honestly. And I heard that they were having some issues with money and some other issues. I can't go too far into it because I don't really know all the details, but I definitely heard from numerous stores that they were having issues, and tons of showrooms had stopped carrying them over the last couple of years. However, in June of last year, they released a supplement and they were updating their lamp line, which was something that really needed to happen. A lot of their stuff has just sort of been falling behind the times. And then this year, they continued to introduce more new lighting designs and some excellent fan designs. I think this definitely marks a comeback for Kendall, and I'm hoping this continues. They're saying they're going to release a new catalog next year, so let's hope they do. Now, up next, we'll talk about Kichler. Now, Kichler had a pretty interesting year. First of all, they introduced another full-line catalog. They usually do those every other year. They had a couple interesting designs. Nothing really that good, though, because my big problem was there were only a few designs, actually, and one of them, the Fit, and the other one, the True, both of which were very blatant knockoffs of Minka Air products, and these were more expensive than the Minka products and far less quality. As I believe I've mentioned in one of my previous discussions, Kichler's been declining in quality ever since they reached the top, and they're definitely going the Hunter route with things and cheapening out. And then later on in the year, we found out they would be merging with Progress. Now, I do not remember whether it was Kichler or Progress that was bought out by this capital investment firm first. However, then the other company did. So now Kichler and Progress are supposed to be merging into one. What that means, I still have no idea. Once again, I did discussion on that at some point. And yeah, I really don't have too much else to say because, like I said, I did a discussion previously and I don't know all the details. All I know is that for Kichler and Progress, it's going to be a very interesting next few years. Now, up next, we'll talk about Cuzco. Last year, they debuted their fan line. This year, they continue to expand it with even better designs than last year, and I'm specifically talking about the Coronado. I adore that fan. It might be one of my favorite fans to come out of recent times. Even Cole at Vintage Fans and More did a product review of it and said he loved it. Honestly, who doesn't love that fan? That thing is pretty darn awesome and definitely one of the best things we've got on the market these days. Now, since they are still pretty new to the fan game, I'm still not really 100% in putting them, oh, this is one of my top favorite brands. I want to give them a few more years to see how they continue to develop. I also did find it interesting that despite them introducing tons of fancy and modern products, this year they introduced a more modern style builder fan called the Ericsson. That was definitely quite interesting. It wasn't even in the catalog, so I'm not too sure. That was definitely kind of an interesting thing to happen. But yeah, that's really just about all I have to say about them. Now, next up, we are going to talk about Matthews Atlas. Now, as per usual, the Matthews Gerber line didn't really change. That usually doesn't anymore. They had such a niche selection of products and they found it and they haven't really needed to change it, so that stayed the same. But on the Atlas side of things, we got a couple new designs. First of all, the Ariella, which was a larger scale fan, which was something that line definitely needed. While they have other larger scale fans, they just don't quite fit the smaller scale HVLS design quite like the Ariella does. On top of that, it also seems they slightly redesigned the Mollywood, and then they also introduced a couple new finishes to the Molly. On top of that, they also introduced a new version of the Alessandra called the Alessandra Tropical, which was very, very exciting. And this fan, obviously, as the name suggests, is a tropical fan, and it's got 5 palm blades. I was very impressed by this. It really does remind me of the Fanimation Islander, but a newer, more updated version. It's honestly kind of like what Fanimation's new Islander should have been, but wasn't. And actually, I kind of waited to talk about this until we got to here, but Fanimation this year announced their quote-unquote return to the tropics with the Paget fan, which, you know, it had a little basket weave on it, nothing too terrific. However, then Atlas comes out and introduces this fan, which is like something I've been waiting for Fanimation to do for ages. And yeah, they honestly blew Fanimation out of the water. The blade color options are incredible. There's just tons and tons of custom options with this thing. The creativity is just incredible. The only real nitpicking I have is that I would like to see 3 and 5 blade available with either palm or standard blades. I feel like that would be a nice touch, especially since the original Islander from Fanimation was 3 blades. I did make this suggestion to them when I talked to them last, and they took it in. Whether they're going to do it, I don't know. If anybody else also would like to see that happen, definitely, you know, spread the word around. And really, you know, Atlas has been doing such a great job. Now, I did a video talking about them. I don't know whether that was one of the ones that got lost or whether it got uploaded. But to make a long story short, Atlas has really been impressing me over the last few years. They went from just introducing so many designs that were so similar to really growing out of their shell and introducing tons of exciting new designs. Yeah, this is definitely a brand that I would continue to watch over the next few years. I'm excited to see what I have to say about them next year because I can imagine it's only going to be better. Now, we'll talk about Maxim next year. Maxim introduced more fan designs to their lineup, which is exciting. So, ever since the mid-2000s, Maxim has had fans. They've mostly been builder fans up until right around 2018 when they introduced Fandeliers. And then a few years ago, they changed them over to Smart Fandelites. And then I would say about a year after that, they started introducing more standard ceiling fan designs, which was definitely quite exciting to see. And at first, some things seemed a little bit clunky. However, as they continue to expand this line, I've been pretty impressed with what I've seen, and the price points have definitely gotten better on these. While I do not consider them, you know, a top contender for ceiling fans, still definitely not a horrible option, and I'm really starting to like a lot of the stuff they introduced. I cannot wait to see what Maxim continues to do because their lighting has impressed me for years, and I can only imagine their fans are going to keep on doing so, and even more so every year. Now, up next, for just a second, I want to talk about Mida. As you might know, Mida Tiffany is, well, a Tiffany manufacturer, and I did talk to them this year. They said they are no longer doing print, but they are continuing to add on more products to the lineup. I've noticed that they've added in some new products here this year, utilizing some of the new Craftmade fans, and they look really terrific. I even saw one that had a big ass fan in it, so they're definitely continuing to expand that lineup, which is exciting. And if you don't know what lineup I'm talking about, I'm of course talking about their Chandelier lineup, which is basically where they take a ceiling fan already on the market, and then they, in their magical, mystical ways, construct a whole light fixture around it and just make something absolutely beautiful. If you're curious, just go to, I don't remember whether it's Mida.com or MidaLighting.com. But yeah, just look up Mida Tiffany and then go check out the chandeliers and you will see what I mean. And I should mention, when I say chandelier, I'm not saying chandelier, I'm saying chandel and then air, A-I-R. So if you want to check those out, feel free. Next up, we will talk about Minka. Now, actually, no, I gotta backtrack for a second here because I gotta get a little pet peeve off of my chest. Well, not really a pet peeve, more of an annoyance. I was told this year Millennium would be introducing some fans. They didn't. Will they do it next year? Who knows? I guess we'll see in the next end of the year discussion. I just had to say that quick because I've been waiting for so long to see that happen because I was told it was happening and then it never did. Anyways, now we will talk about Minka. Easily one of the top manufacturers right now. They introduced tons of great designs this year, especially the pinup. We haven't seen a new counter-rotating fan be introduced to the industry in quite a long time, so it was definitely exciting to see this come out. I really like the way they did this, and a lot of the other designs were also terrific, so overall a great job. I also like their versions that are definitely supposed to be takes on the Maverick design from Visual Comfort. I think it was the Vapor was the down rod one, and the Avter was the hugger. They say these were real hand-carved wood blades. I'm not too sure what wood they're made out of, but they definitely don't seem bad. They were definitely pretty exciting, and they look pretty nice. And, you know, as per usual, they're just continuing to make that line better and better. I should say, like, electronics in these fans still continues to be an occasional issue. However, a lot of brands have that issue these days, so it's not all that surprising. Now, up next, we will talk about Modern Fan. This year, they didn't do anything new, but they did introduce their first full-line catalog since 2019. and that was definitely exciting to see. Anyways, next up, we will talk about Modern Forms. This year, I was kind of disappointed that they only did a supplement. Well, I wasn't disappointed that they did a supplement. I was disappointed in the way they laid out the supplement. Honestly, with what they had, it doesn't even make sense. You know, why did they even bother to print it? I certainly wouldn't have printed it. They're saying they're saving the environment, so why even print off like a little 4-page supplement? Just make it all digital. I don't understand. If you want to go digital that bad, or you want to save paper that bad, just go all digital at that point. As much as I love printed catalogs, something like that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Still, this year, though, they did introduce a couple really nice designs. And, of course, my number one had to have been the Spinster. I absolutely love that thing. It reminds me so much of the Big Ass Fan's Haiku, but I honestly like it more. I like the mesh housing that the fan has got. I like the shape of the blades, and I like the little LED in the center. This thing is a really nice design, and I absolutely adore it. I've been lucky enough to experience them in person, and they are just as incredible as you could imagine. Now, up next, we will talk about Visual Comfort. This year, they finally put out a new catalog. However, I was very disappointed to find that it was all last year's introductions. Nothing that they introduced this year was even in it, which is weird seeing as they called it the 2024 fan catalog, even though on the back it literally says 2023 on it. Clearly, they meant to release it last year, but just decided against it for whatever reason. Not too sure why. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Their electronics are continuing to be an issue. I've got a fan right now that I've had for over a year now, and I've been waiting for a replacement receiver. Still haven't gotten it. A real bother. I 100% do not recommend this brand at all. Not to mention that if you're a small business supporter, they sell directly to designers, and they have tons of showrooms of their own that are putting the small businesses out of business. Overall, I don't really like this brand. A lot of the stores around here have really stopped carrying them and stopped paying the line any attention. They've replaced their products with other ones. Not to mention, I don't understand the hype with the Maverick fan. I never did. I never liked it all that much. And I've installed them, and the blades seem really cheap. I do not like them. The larger fans definitely have a rather bad wobble problem as well. Overall, this brand is nothing at all to write home about, and something that I would definitely steer clear of. Up next, we'll talk about Progress. Progress introduced something really exciting this year. So we all know the basic Fandeliers that have a little portable fan motor in them. Well, Progress decided to make it oscillate and go around, and they called it, I think it was the Oscillar series or Oscillar, something like that. Either way, I was very impressed to see this. Now, I can imagine this probably brings up the noise factor a little bit and still isn't really the greatest, but it was definitely an exciting thing to see develop. Not to mention, they introduced a model called the Insignia this year that I absolutely fell in love with. It is a seriously, seriously gorgeous fan. I love that thing so much. Progress has really been continuing to improve over the last few years, and who knows what's going to happen with the Kichler merge. Really, I feel like Progress needs to move up a phase, I should say move up a step, and so does Kichler. However, the difference here is Kichler was doing terrific, but then they dropped, whereas Progress was down at the bottom, but now they're moving up. So I'm not really too sure what we'll be seeing here in the future, but I'm definitely excited. Now, up next, just for a second, I'll talk about Quoizel. I believe they introduced a couple new Fandeliers this year. Nothing too, interesting or special. That's what they've been doing now for about 5 or 6 years, is just introducing a couple Fandeliers each year. These are, of course, the ones with the smaller portable fan motor in them, so they are definitely, a lot more for the fixture design and the quality rather than the air movement. Next up, we will talk about Quorum, Oxygen, and Cyan. Now, as we know, these brands are all linked together, so I'm going to talk about them one by one. First of all, Quorum, this year they had an introduction that's probably been my favorite in the longest of times. I absolutely loved all the designs. They were all terrific. The catalog was great. I really, really did love it. And next up, Oxygen introduced quite a few new designs, some of which I really liked. They introduced one called the Enorme, which was obviously designed to sort of go after the HVLS Big S fans market. And Quorum actually introduced the Zeus in June the previous year, so it definitely makes sense, that they're trying to bring themselves up to speed just like everybody else is. Oxygen also introduced the Method, which I absolutely adored. They had some really, really good stuff this year. And then in the middle of the year, it was announced that Cyan Design would be introducing their own catalog. I'm sorry, not their own catalog. They've been doing that for ages. They were going to be introducing their own fan designs. And I was very, very impressed. I was hoping to get a catalog of theirs in, but they forced the people to register them. So when the rep finally got back to me, they said, I just need your tax revenues and all this information. I'm like, I'm not a dealer. I've told you that. And he was like, oh, well, then I can't really send you one of these. And yeah, that was kind of a bother, but what do you do? Most brands don't really like to do print anymore. And Cyan is definitely a little bit more of almost like a wholesaler, essentially. It's not like a showroom lighting brand quite like the others are. Cyan's got a lot more home decor and furniture, but still, it was exciting to see their ceiling fans get introduced. And if I'm being honest, I have no idea where you can purchase these besides online. I'm not too sure how many lighting showrooms even have the Cyan line. Another thing I should mention is, once again, this brand beat Fanimation at their own game with the whole Return of the Tropics. Quite like Fanimation, they had fans with, hints of basket weave and some other stuff. However, they just had far more models with this, and I also really did like their designs a lot better. So overall, a pretty strong first year, and I'll be curious to see whether, quite like a lot of other furniture brands, whether every couple of years they totally wipe the line and start fresh. Some brands do this. They might be doing that. I'm not too sure. It's too early to say. Definitely a brand to keep an eye on, though. Now that we've got the core brands out of the way, we can talk about Hinckley. Probably my other favorite manufacturer of all time. Well, I shouldn't say of all time, but of right now. This year, they did another full line catalog, and they introduced quite a few excellent designs as per usual. The Oliver was absolutely beautiful. I really loved that one. And then there were a few other ones that I also really did love. Overall, this was a great year. And then in June, they introduced some new products that seemed even more upscale and more refined than what I was already used to from Hinckley. And that continued to impress me some more. Hinckley is definitely one of my top favorite brands. Their designs are always on point. They really did take the Regency name and make something good out of it again. And yeah, I just cannot wait to see what they do every single year. It's always a brand to keep an eye on. Now, up next, I will talk about Royal Pacific, or RP, for just a second. This year, they finally introduced a new catalog after a couple years of not having one. They had a couple new designs, however, I believe they were all introduced over the previous years and just put into this catalog. Overall, nothing too, interesting, just another, catalog that's got mostly builder grade stuff. Once again, this brand is more designed for commercial and home builders. Now, up next, we're going to talk about Savoy. Savoy this year introduced quite a few fandeliers. A lot of them I was pretty impressed with. However, for the ceiling fan line, they discontinued tons of them. They dropped all the names off of it. And last year they put them in the back of not the Essentials, but the other one, the Meridian catalog, which is kind of like their lower end, more builder style lighting, which is, pretty surprising. It really seems as if Savoy doesn't really care about the ceiling fans anymore. They only care about fandeliers. Personally, I believe they should either do something with the standard ceiling fan line or just completely drop it. But I'm not really too sure whether they'll do that. Who knows what the future brings? I've given up. They haven't released a fan catalog in a couple of years, and they haven't even printed the Fandelier catalog. So, I don't know. Not to mention, they just have so many catalogs out at once. It's overly complicated. I always did like Savoy, but, these last few years have definitely been pretty disappointing. And we'll talk next about Concord and Sunset. Now, once again, you're probably thinking, that brand's gone. Well, no, actually it isn't. And I did a small little mini discussion on this too. Both of those brands, the assets and the name and the intellectual property, were all bought by Urban 33. And they have slowly been getting rid of the back stock. However, now they're introducing a couple designs of their own. And from what they tell me, they're going to continue to try and expand this line and make it something good again. And as of right now, I've been told they're going to keep the Sunset and Concord name on it for the sake of the customers who are used to that. However, maybe sometime down the line, they might be changing it. Now, up next, I'll talk about TransGlobe here for a sec. They introduced another full-line catalog, a couple new designs. Some of these designs are okay, but this brand is honestly mostly almost builder. It's like higher-end builder stuff, essentially. None of it's all that terrific. And quite frankly, I don't really have too much more to say about it. And actually, one more thing I will say though, because it ties into the next brand, is that you can actually get a lot of this stuff at Menards, which is a home center. What else can you get out of Menards? Vaxel products. And yep, Vaxel is the next brand we're going to talk about. This year they introduced quite a few new designs. However, nothing really stood out to me. I mean, you can get all this stuff at Menards essentially. None of it's too high quality. And yet the Vaxel prices at the showrooms are high. It doesn't really make sense why you'd purchase them. They haven't impressed me in literal, years. It's been over a decade since I've really been impressed by anything they've done. Still, not the worst things out there you can buy, but there's definitely better. So yeah, overall, pretty, basic year for them. Nothing too interesting. Next up, I'm going to talk about Westinghouse here for a second. This is by far the worst lighting brand here. The only thing they can do right are light bulbs and parts. As far as the whole fixtures go, whether it's a chandelier, a wall sconce, a flush mount, or a ceiling fan, it's all hot garbage, especially the ceiling fans. And this year, I don't even think they actually introduced any new ceiling fan designs. Overall, I don't even want to talk about them anymore. The brand's just total garbage at this point. And the final brand we're going to talk about is Wind River. This year, they introduced a new full-line catalog with a few new designs and some more finish editions. This brand is still definitely finding its footing since it's only been around for about 10 years. As some of you may know, it was started by a former Craftmate executive. I believe he has left the company now, and I'm not too sure whether he just gave his shares to everybody else who was, who owned the company, or what the deal is there. But that did happen this year. I'm not too sure what the future is going to hold for them. It's definitely always interesting to see, especially with these up-and-coming brands, especially this one. It seems like so many brands just start out of nowhere in Texas. Texas definitely has some of the most just random little ceiling fan outfits that you've never even heard of before. Some other brands like Revolution Lighting is based out of there, and then there's some other ones too. Old Jacksonville, I think, is based out of there. There's definitely quite a few. Now, while I did say last brand, there are a few things I might as well touch on. First of all, the online retailers. First of all, Rejuvenation. They introduced a couple new designs this year. They almost immediately discontinued one of them, and now they've only just got the other one left. Lamps Plus continued to expand their line this year, and they're definitely getting a little more high-end and a little bit fancy looking. They also gave the magazines a bit of a makeover this year, which was definitely pretty exciting to see. Overall, pretty interesting year for them. And then there's some other online retailers, but none of them really have their own exclusive stuff that's worth mentioning. Now, what about the home centers? Well, Menards introduced quite a few interesting designs this year, mostly all on the Patriot lighting side. There was one, I'm spacing on the name of it now, but it's got a lighted canopy and it is super cool. Imagine a Minka Air Simple in black with maple blades. And then the housing is just a little bit taller, and then it's got a big lighted canopy on it. Well, really, it's just a big black canopy with a ring of LEDs around it. It's pretty interesting looking, and I was rather impressed by that. Now, Home Depot and Lowe's both introduced some interesting designs. Definitely some stuff I liked, other stuff I didn't. And on their websites, they had some other interesting exclusive things. Once again, some of which I liked, some of which I didn't. And yeah, I do believe that is every brand that there really is to talk about. Obviously, there's some other brands like Parrot Uncle and Prominence Home. Really, all these brands do the same things every year. They just continue to introduce new designs whenever they feel like it. These brands basically work very closely with the factories, and there's no middleman since their store sells it. Or I should say their online website / store sells it. So, with that, things are definitely a little bit different, and things usually stick around to be the same. And yeah, now I do believe that is everything. I've talked about everything I wanted to this year. Definitely quite a few interesting things that happened, and I figured that even though I lost this video before, I wanted to redo it because this is always just one of my favorite things to do every year, and I did not want to leave you guys without it just because my phone deleted the video. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you had a wonderful year, and I will see you next year. Goodbye.